Good morning, everyone. I'm Surety Sunil, and I'm here to take a seminar on the topic Discharge of Surety from Liability from the chapter Special Contracts, Contract of Indemnity, and Guarantee. So, I'm here to take the second point of the discharge of surety from liability, which says that discharge of surety by conduct of the creditor. That means the surety's liability can be discharged by the conduct of the creditor. It can be done due to the following consequences. First one is variation in term of the contract, and the second one is release or discharge of the principal debtor. So the first one says that variation in terms of the contract means any variance made without the surety's consent in the term of the contract between the principal debtor and the creditor discharges the surety as to the transaction subsequent to the variance. This means that if there is a alteration made in the contract by the principal debtor and the creditor without the consent or the knowledge of the surety, then such an altered contract will discharge the surety from the liability. That means the surety need not perform whatever the altered contract says. He does not have to perform it or anything that comes in the altered contract without the consent or the approval or the knowledge of the surety. It further says that although the words as to transactions subsequent to the variance are more important in case of continuing guarantee, but the principle as laid down to the section is equally applicable in specific guarantee as well. That means that this such a kind of discharge from the surety's liability can be possible or more applicable in the continuing guarantee, but it is also applicable. Such principles are also laid down in the sections of specific guarantee as well. That means it is applicable in specific guarantee also. If there is any change in terms of the contract between the principal debtor and the creditor without the consent of the surety gets discharged as regards transactions subsequent to such, or the transactions following such alteration. According to that, such alterations made, the surety need not perform the activities mentioned in the contract. In other words, the surety is not liable for the altered contract. It is to be noted that the alteration is not prejudicial or it is beneficial to the surety is not a ground for denying the discharge. That means the surety cannot deny the discharge because even if it benefits the surety or even if it is a good thing for the surety cannot deny the discharge. He is discharged from the liability even if it is beneficial for him or not. Again, accepting further security for the same debt is not treated as variance in term of the contract. Accepting further security for the same debt is not treated as a variation or as an alteration of the contract. Now, let us see some examples. The first one says that P contracted to build a ship for C. So, the contract is between P and C. The contract money to be paid by installments as the work reached certain stages of completion. So, the amount to be paid is to be done in installments, and S became the surety for the due performance of the contract by P. S became the surety of this contract, and C allowed P to draw a large portion of the last two installments before they were due. That means this is the alteration that happened in the contract without the consent, approval, or the knowledge of S. That is the surety. So that is why S will be discharged from the liability in case of this contract. That's the first example. Now, the next example says that S guaranteed payment of goods supplied by C to P upon the condition that 18 months credit was given. So, here S will be the surety, and S was the one who guaranteed payment for the goods supplied by C to P. Okay, and the condition was that the credit will be given for 18 months. But C gives only 12-month credit. That means this is the alteration that happened in this contract. So this is why surety will be discharged from his liability. Now, the second consequence under the discharge of surety by conduct of liability is the release or discharge of the principal debtor. Here it says that the surety is discharged by any contract between the creditor and the principal debtor by which the principal debtor is released. So, if the principal debtor is released from the contract, then automatically the surety will also be released. Any release of the principal debtor is a release of the surety also. So, as the principal debtor will be released, subsequently the surety will also be released. The surety is also discharged by any act or omission of the creditor the legal consequence of which is the discharge of the principal debtor. So any legal consequence that will lead to the release of the discharges of the principal debtor will lead to the discharge of liabilities of the surety. That is what this point is about. Now, let us see the examples of this point. The first one says that P gives a guarantee to R for goods to be supplied by R to Q. That means here P is a surety. R supplies good to Q and afterwards Q become embarrassed and the contract with his creditors, including R, to assign to them his property in consideration of their releasing him from their demands. That means here Q become embarrassed and he doesn't want to continue the contract anymore. So here Q is released from his debt by the contract with R and subsequently P is discharged from his suretyship. That means here the contract between Q and R or the liabilities between them are released. That means it will lead to the release of a discharge from P from his suretyship. That is the first example. Now, the second example says that P contracts with Q for a fixed price to build a house for Q within a stipulated time, Q supplying the necessary timber. That means that P and Q have entered into a contract where P is supposed to build a house for Q within a stipulated period of time, and Q is supposed to be supplying the necessary timber that is required for the building of the house. Now, R becomes the surety for P's performance of the contract. Now, Q omits the supply of the timber. So, here, according to the contract, Q is supposed to be supplying the necessary timber, but then Q omits to do that. So, the obligations of or the duties of P will be released. Subsequently, the surety, that is R's suretyship, will also be discharged. That is the second example.